Hello everybody, and welcome to my live stream on building speed on scales on guitar. I'm going to make a link available to you to get the presentation that I prepared so you can follow along with this. I'm going to post it into the live chat thing here if you don't have it already, because I'm going to be giving you a lot of information, and I'm going to be giving you a lot of information, and it's going to really help you retain it if you follow along with this. Now, the presentation is called Building Scale Speed on Guitar, Necessary Preparation and Training. And in reality, it's going to really be far more than just what you need for scales. The reason I centered it around scale playing is because scale playing is one of the most difficult things to do on the guitar. And in order to play scales easily, you have to have a lot of other things already, skills built into your fingers. Really not just the fingers, because we don't play just with the fingers, but it's a matter of the arms, the body itself. So we're going to be going through all these kind of things that must be in place before scales are really attempted. And one of the things you're going to find is that these skills need to be built from the beginning and will help you with everything you play. They're really not just about scales. I give every student these things. This is what I call my system is called Principles of Correct Practice for Guitar, and these are all the things that are contained in that entire system. So I'm going to move to the second slide here, and because I want to make this point in the beginning, because a lot of people get confused because there's two different hand positions that we see people use. Okay, this hand position here, where you're straight on like this, the fingers are all curled, and the knuckles themselves are parallel to the strings. That's you could call it the acoustic position. You could call it the classical. And that is very different than the position we need for the pentatonic scale. In a pentatonic scale, you have this slant like this, okay? It's a totally different position of the hand, where the hand comes around like this. We don't keep it out like this. We want to grab the neck. That's because for bending technique, that's what you need. So if I'm teaching somebody rock, I'm giving them this. However, I'm first teaching them and going through and the exercises that I'll be showing you to develop this, because both these positions use very, I'm reading some of these comments. Both of these positions use different muscles in the hand. The muscles used here, very different than the muscles used here. In pentatonic based playing, you don't generally bend that joint right there, okay? And you play a lot of flat finger type stuff like that, because you can do that on electric. And in fact, it's good to do it on electric. However, even on electric, if you need to do some kind of hammer thing like that, you need to have the bend in the distal joints here. And I find when I get students, I usually get students who've been playing for a while, sometimes 10 years, 20, 30, 40. They don't have that. They can't bend those joints, and it hampers everything they do. So that's the point I want to make here, is that you want to get this kind of training in the hand before you really develop this kind of training. The pentatonic, by the way, is a different use of these joints here. The joints here in the hand, right here, the metacarpal phalangeal joints, very different than these joints. These joints only go that way, but these joints go all the way around. However, their ability, the joint mobility itself, the ability to slant like that has to be developed. Some people simply cannot do this. When they try to do that, they get that. Okay, so I want to make that point about these two different hand positions. Now I am going to move on. Somebody's asking me, can you do take it on the run? No, I can't. Okay, so what are you going to accomplish? Scale playing is a complex series of actions of both hands made up of number. Okay, I think I said that already, so I don't need to say that again. Although I will make the point. If you are one of those students who I meet all the time who began lesson, when you first started lessons, somebody gave you a scale, like say, and you had to practice that, you probably ran into a lot of problems that may still be with you because no beginner hand can do that without tensing up the shoulder. If you ask a beginner to do something like position that finger there like that, they will tense their shoulder. They usually won't be able to do it, and they'll get all kinds of tension. And as they practice every day with that tension, you know, faithfully learning that scale, it just gets worse and worse. So want to make the point that if you have started out with scales, it's very likely that you have some things going on. Okay, why do we practice scales? There's two reasons. I'm really only focusing on the first one tonight, technical development of finger ability. The other reason for practicing scales, which probably most of you are familiar with, which is actual playing, is to use them musically. And you know, in every style, you have the scales that are appropriate to that style. Jazz, obviously, jazz type playing is going to use and require the largest number of scales to be known. Segovia said, more technical problems are solved in the study of scales than any other exercise, and that is true. That's why on every instrument, people are always emphasizing scale practice. You know, getting the coordination, getting both hands to work together like this, getting the pick to be able to play with some power. That is a lot of coordination going on. And we'll be talking a lot about the pick action as I go along. When I get a new student and I want to see what the state of their technique is, that's usually what I ask for. I'll say, like, you know, play a scale. I might even say, you know, put the metronome on, and you can test yourself this way too. Can you play up the scale? Have every note be there with good articulation in the right hand and emphasizing the beat like that. Everyone should test themselves that way. Switch to this other guitar, because that's kind of like, although that's an achievement that takes a lot of work, but everyone should get to that point. I bring all my students to that, and then we move the speed up. So what does it mean, good scale playing? It just means, yeah, all the notes are there, and you know, you can hear them. When I ask people to show me the scale, I'll tell you what I usually see. This is what I just saw with a particular student I got on TrueFire. I said, play me a scale, so he went. That's what the fingers looked like, and that's pretty much what it sounded like, as opposed to like that kind of action. Why? Because of what I said before. He probably got scales early on, tied them up with tension, and now his fingers are not working that well. So let's talk about, this is where we get into the meat of it here. The left hand. I'm going to show you the process by which I train somebody's left hand. And it begins with looking at the arm itself and a couple of uses of the arm. And then the two states of the finger. Basically, there's two states of the arm in playing. There are two states of the finger. Now, all good players are doing this, are doing what I'm telling you, although they may not know they're doing it. The two states of the arm are the floating arm, where I'm like this. If I'm doing chord changes and I'm lifting everything like that, you know, then I'm using the floating arm when my arm is unsupported by the guitar and I'm engaging all the muscles here. The floating arm is inherently more difficult than the heavy arm because the muscles are all supporting up here, the large muscles. Now, what the heavy arm is, the heavy arm means that when I play, no matter what it is, if it's chord changes like this, if it's that kind of thing, I am playing in such a way that everything is relaxed up here, and my arm weight is coming into the finger, and I do not lift. See, if I was playing Blackbird, okay, now I will do it this way. I will hold that finger until I get this finger down, and then I hold that, and I see people play this all the time, and they'll do like, see, I can do it this way. Any good player can do that, but it is inherently harder. And if you're playing something that's very difficult, you want to minimize your heavy arm, the floating arm, and you want to maximize the heavy arm. If I play a piece by Bach, even though there's thousands of movements, the fact is I am never releasing through that whole piece. My fingering is arranged such that I always have something down. I never engage these muscles here. Okay, so we need to cultivate the use of the heavy arm. Along with getting the heavy arm, we need to have the firm finger and the light finger. So what is that? And this is really important because there's many students that never have a light finger. They always have a tense finger. When they play, they don't know it, but their fingers are always tense. The light finger, and here's how you can test yourself, and you may be surprised. If you were to take the guitar and you just go like, hold your fingers like this, nice, totally light, like, they would flap in the wind, okay? And then you gently curl them, and then you bring them down to the string like this. If you're trying this right now, you may find you can't curl your fingers like this. You may find your pinky wants to do this. You may find that your hand starts shaking, and that's because you're going so slow, you're preventing the normal tension that arises from happening, except it's happening anyway because the muscle memory causes that shaking. When I give students this exercise to just calm their fingers down, I tell them, let the shaking happen. Just let it happen, and just breathe and relax your body, and don't tense against it. What most people do is they tense against the tension. So when they start to get tense, then they tense, and then it all gets worse from there. When we touch a string, it should be the light finger. If I'm playing a scale, okay, as I play these notes, when my finger touches the string, it should be the light finger. And then the finger should get firm. Okay, so it goes from light like this to firm. And that's when the arm weight comes through. And when we practice this scale, that's how we have to do it. You get started, in your starting position like this. You have this finger down, it's already firm. I'll have this one. If I'm going to play that scale, I'll put those two fingers down to begin with, and I relax my arm, and all the arm weight comes through, and then I play. Now, every time I play, the fingers that are not being used have to be held. They're held in position, but they have to be as relaxed as possible. So that it's going to look look like this. Now, here's what a lot of people will get. They put, as soon as they put the first finger down, the other fingers do this, okay? They're all tense, and as they play, they get tense, and the fingers that are not being used get tenser and tenser, especially the third finger. If you're practicing this scale, you may find, see, the third finger is not used till the seventh note. And in a lot of cases, what somebody does is they play the first note, third finger tenses, they stretch out this one like that. This one's very tense and rising. Then they play, and so with each note they play, the third finger gets tense like crazy. And then when they need it, they miss it. That is probably the most missed note in scales. We'll see later that we have to train the fingers for what I call finger lowness. So that's about the firm finger and the light finger, the floating arm and the heavy arm. You should think about those concepts and examine them in your own case. Okay, the skills we need in the fingers before they should take on scales. We have to have the ability, you basically have to have the ability to put your fingers like this with every joint curved, including the distal joint. And if you have trouble with this, I tell people just do this. You should be able to bend your fingers so that they're at a right angle, okay? And then you put them down. That reminds me, there's something I want to tell you about the heavy arm too, because a lot of people say, well, I just can't feel this heavy arm. The feeling of the heavy arm is the same as if you were to take your arm like this and just lay it on the neck like that, okay? And then you go like this, and you can feel the guitar pressing into your leg. And then you go like this. So basically, you're hanging your arm on it, using a little bit of grip from the fingers, but no more than you need. So you go like this, and you'll feel the heavy arm. Go like this and hang by your thumb. Go like this, and then eventually come around into this position I'm showing you here, where all the fingers are spread and curled on the strings. Doing it up the neck is a lot easier than doing it down here. Somebody just said, getting more and more tingling, sleeping, numb fingers, carpal tunnel. Well, all of this prevents carpal tunnel syndrome, okay? Not having these things in place and playing difficult material is what causes carpal tunnel. So you want to come around like this. I would do it up the neck first. Doing it down the neck is the hardest. This is the hardest thing to do on the hardest position to maintain in terms of a single note position is to spread out like this. You need a lot of development in the hand and arm. Many people will not be able to do this. They'll find this happening. Okay, this cannot be fixed. It's not going to be fixed in 1 hour. It's not going to be fixed in 1 week. To get from someone who can't do this, because if you can't do this, then you can't. You know, if you had a passage like something like that, you wouldn't do that either, because any type of pull-off needs the curvature in the joints and needs that separation. So I'm just showing you this so you can check yourself. In my training, we start up the neck. We do not, a beginner should not learn guitar down here, okay? It causes nothing but tension in the body that stays there. The guitar should be learned, and the first time the left hand meets the strings, it should be up here like this, okay? Because when the arm's away from the body, you're supporting 10 pounds, 10 pounds of weight. Your hand's not developed anyway. You're just building tons. Okay, somebody asked, in starting position, where's your thumb? When you're going to go across the strings, your thumb will be, what happens? Your thumb will be, okay, here's my thumb when I'm on the 6th string. And as I go right about the 4th to the 3rd string, your thumb's going to want to do this. And that's about it. You should not come too far out and be unbalanced. You want to keep in like this, okay? So I just let it come down a little bit as I'm going through like that. The first exercise that you should do before scales are done, what should happen is these concepts should be explained. you should practice the light finger with all the fingers on the string. This prevents, to train the whole hand at once, prevents one of the worst things that happens to people is, like, say they begin, like, you know, and they're doing the Mel Bay book, and they, you know, and that's their first experience, and Mel says, okay, well, here's the open string, and here's your first note to learn. This is like one of the hardest things to do on guitar, to have your arm all the way out here, bend the finger and do that and stay relaxed. No beginner can do that. So they're going to be huffing and puffing and squeezing. And then the worst thing is what happens to the other fingers. When they put this down, all these fingers go here. So their first experience in playing is so full of tension, and it generally doesn't change, except for very talented people. Talented people who are obsessed with guitar those are the people that can become players, because their body intelligence tells them this can't be right, and they naturally relax as time goes by. But like me, you could be playing 20, 25 years and not know you have these problems, and they're affecting you and you don't know it. So not a desirable situation. The first exercises you want to do, and this is all in my book, The Principles, and demonstrated on the DVD that goes with it. You come light on the string like this, and then you practice going across the strings like this. Okay, I'm going across with light fingers, no tension in my fingers. My fingers right now are like butterflies landing on a string, okay? I can feel the string. That's how light your finger needs to be. Now, don't be surprised if you can't exactly do this, but this is what you want to head toward. And then you come back like this, and I'm putting all the fingers. So this way, I'm preventing fingers from tensing up while other fingers are being used. You would gradually work that down until you got it here, and you could do this. Now, it's not like, people get confused about this all the time. They say, well, I'm doing this and I feel tense, so that can't be right. But that is right. And I'm looking here, did I? Yeah, okay, did put that link. Your goal in playing and practicing is not to be in a state of relaxation. And that's a big confusion, a confusion that I have probably contributed to, because it's the language that's clumsy. Relaxation is not a state. We are not relaxed when we play. We are in a state of controlled tension that is bringing balanced forces from both sides of the body. That's really what we're always looking for. Relaxation is not a state, it's an action. That's why it's called relax, okay? To relax means to return to a state of laxity. So that means if I'm playing and I'm making various efforts, like if I am doing this chord, I'm not relaxed. My fingers are working, my arm is working. However, I'm controlling it, and the rest of my body is staying in as untense as possible. But the relaxed part comes, say I was playing this, it's from a particular study, classical study, and relax means that after I make this effort, I release the effort. That's all. I release it. And so that when a finger's done, it returns to a state of laxity. That's going to be true of the right hand or pick also. So we're not looking for relaxation. We're looking for tension at the right time, in the right way, relaxing at the right time, in the right way. That's what we're looking for. So if you do this and you say, oh, I can't be doing it right. Students say that all the time. I can't be doing it right because I feel tension. I said, no, of course you're going to feel tension. Doesn't mean you're not doing it right. It's the form that's important. Movement proceeds from form. Okay, so it's the form that you want to maintain. Things will change over time. It's a physical process like anything else, okay? Like me starting to do some exercises the other day, and so I said, okay, I'm going to start running in place, So after about a minute, I thought I was going to die. Okay, I'm up to 2 minutes, but took 3 weeks. Point being, it doesn't mean I was doing anything wrong. It just means that I'm completely out of shape. So it's the same thing with this. It takes months to develop this, very carefully, step by step, develop that. Okay. Kind of abridging here, but after doing these, okay, after doing this with the light fingers, coming across And this is the sequence of exercises that I give as foundation training to every student. Then we do it, but not with the light fingers, with the heavy arm and the firm fingers. So now I'm going to come to the neck like this. I'm going to relax my arm. So I'm hanging on here now, as if I let go with my fingers, gripping from the front and the thumb behind. If I were to let go, I'd get this. So that is a sensation that you must achieve yourself. You must discover this feeling of the heavy arm. However, when fingers go across the strings, okay, here's the first exercise, that where you hear notes. Okay, 1, 4. 1. This is the exercise that come across like this with 1 and 4. But what's happening is I put all the fingers on. Now I'm going to release 2, 3, and 4. Even that is challenging because a lot of people do this. As soon as they release 2, 3, and 4, they get this. Because when you release these fingers, you're changing the balance for the whole arm, and you have to do muscle adjustments. The arm has to adjust. You should know this about the left hand. Fingers do 2 things. They go on and they come off. Coming off is harder. It's more of a challenge than going on. Why is that? Because if I'm standing on 2 feet and I lift 1 foot, I'm moving from balance to a state of imbalance. It can be done, but it requires more skill. If I'm sitting on 1 foot and I put the other foot down, now I moved into a state of balance, from imbalance to balance. If I have a finger down, I have 1 finger down. If I have 1 finger down and then I put another finger down, I've just gone from relative instability to stability. So this feels a lot better than this. And it's different for every finger. Every finger configuration on the left hand is a different feeling of balance in the hand. What causes people so much trouble is, like, even in this 1, 4, they'll play 1, they play 4. Now what has to happen is the 4 has to touch light. Go down like this, then get heavy. You feel the arm relax into it. Here's the most troublesome part of playing scales, is when you cross the strings. Now I have to release pressure from this 1. This is where people screw up all the time. In fact, they screw up on this, okay? Because I have everybody learn this 1, 4 before they try scales. And where they always mess up is when that 1 has to come over. And as they build speed, that's where they mess up. It should be like, here's about 80. Now you see how my 1 is staying low because it doesn't even lift. Because the way you need to practice this is you play 1, you play 4. Expect that when you release pressure from 1, okay, if you played 1, then you played 4. You don't even think of lifting it because the finger doesn't lift. The finger drags. Lifting is this action, okay? But what the left hand is going to do is this action. It's going to drag over like this, so it's not really a lift. It never loses contact. But the point I want to make is that as soon as that begins to release pressure, tension begins up here. Most guitar students do not feel it. They merely suffer its effects, okay? That is why you have to use a special form of practice I teach called no-tempo practice, where you do things so slowly. I have all my students do this. I'm going to release pressure from my index. I'm going to do it so slowly. I am feeling my neck and my shoulders. I can feel them react, and I control it. And then I bring the finger over. Now I reapply pressure, because during that time, all the weight's on this finger. Now I'm going to put the weight back here. And now I feel pretty good again. Now, this makes me feel better, but now I'm going to feel uncomfortable again because I'm going to release the 1. So I'm talking about very subtle sensations, but guess what? Good players are people who naturally feel the physical sensations of their movements on a very subtle level because they're paying a lot of attention, and attention is the key. So these finger combinations, in brief, 1, 4, like that, 1, 3, and the important thing about 1, 3 is that 4 doesn't react. If your 4th finger does this, then you will have trouble with everything you play. And A lot of people's fourth fingers do that. In fact, usually it's only professionals that have worked these things out, you know, for themselves, because you just can't play it unless you do. You can't even do like you can't even do that if you're, every time you put your 3 down, your 4's tensing up. So, you know, if you're gonna get good, you got to figure these things out. But I like to save my students the trouble of figuring them out. So we need to get all these up to a decent speed, you know, like this, 16th notes, 1, 3, and then there's 1, 2. 1, 2 is actually the most troublesome, because the most troublesome pair of fingers is 2 and 3. It is very prone to lots of things going wrong, and a lot of people cannot put the second finger down without the third finger tensing up. They can't do what I'm doing right now. They can't have the third finger stay quiet. So I'm going to give you a technique for training your third finger. This is very powerful, works for everyone who uses it. If your third finger suffers from what I call finger squeeze or finger rise in reaction to 2, what you do is this. You play 1, you touch the third finger to the string, you don't put any pressure, and then you put the 2 down. While the 3, I'm sorry, you put the 3 down with no pressure. While the 1's down with pressure, 3's touching lightly. Now I'm going to lightly touch with 2, and then I'm going to slowly lift 3. And then I'm going to go, and as I go up across the strings, I'm going to keep 3 touching the string behind lightly each time. And you have to do this super slow. You have to relax after every note, and you have to keep relaxing your neck. The tension, finger control begins in the neck and then down the shoulder. And when you get really sensitive, you'll feel that. Okay, so that, doing the touching technique and using the metronome to build up speed on it will finally free up your third finger from your second finger. Okay, let me go on here. Where am I? Yes. Okay. Yeah, well, I kind of talked about this. The 2 main diseases of these things have to be eliminated from the hand before you can play. The 2 diseases of the left hand have to be eliminated from your hand before you can practice scales. They are finger squeeze, fingers coming together, and every untrained hand will do this. Okay, the fingers squeezing together and fingers rising. So we have to train the fingers for lowness and separation. And that takes some doing. Okay, so here's just a listing of everything that has to really be achieved in the hand. And the only thing new here is that after we do those 2 finger combinations, we do 3 fingers. We do like 1, 3, 4. So 1, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 4. The important thing here is when you do a 1, 3, 4, and I wish somebody would have told me this when I started. You play 1, you play 3. Now, if you don't really pay attention, when you go with 4, your 3 will increase its pressure, and you're going to get real stuck. So you have to make sure that as 4 touches, the 3 releases. Again, that has to be done very slowly, then worked up. Then 1, 2, 4, the same thing. I play 1, I play 2, I go with 4, I release the 2. Okay, yeah, somebody says the 2 and 3 share a common tendon. Okay. So much for unity. Okay, so with 1, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 4, now your left hand is ready for scales. So now we're going to talk about the right hand. The right hand is an entirely different animal than the left hand. It's a complete set of dynamics, and it needs to be appreciated. The left hand is most like a rock climber. Okay, when the left hand functions, it's using a lot of stretch, strength, leverage. If I have a difficult chord change, here's a difficult chord change that I practice all the time, and from a certain piece, okay, because it's really good. Now, the only way I can make this change is to do this, because I can't come out of the air because of the 2-3 separation. So what I do is I put the 3 down, then I do this, I move this over, then I do this, and I stretch out, and that works in the piece. So that's an example of how the left hand operates like a rock climber. The right hand is operating on strings that are suspended in space. Therefore, when you make a note, you are essentially interacting with an elastic medium stretched in space. That means it gives. That means when you place force on it to put it into vibration, it places force back on you. This is one of the most common things that people should deal with, but don't. Somebody begins guitar, and they go to play their first note. They put the pick on the string. They begin to push on the string. What they don't feel is that since the string is pushing back, you have to tense every muscle in your arm up to your neck. Okay? So in order to play a note, you have to do that. And what happens is they tense like that, but they don't relax. They play the note, and the tension that happened in the shoulder, and you can feel it. If you put the pick on the string and just start to push, you'll feel your shoulder tense up. And it must tense up, because if it didn't, you wouldn't be able to control your pick position. It's the same thing as if you just did this. You pushed up. So they play a note, and the problem is they do not perform the action of relaxing. They keep the tension. And so they play the next note with that tension. And so every note they play, the more they play, the tenser they get. What must be done as you do scales or any other exercise is you must come to the string very lightly and push on it. Feel the tension in the arm. Okay, feel the tension in the arm. Play the note and then relax. And then you do your up pick. Now it's a different kind of feeling, because now the string is now pushing me this way, and I'm using my bicep to do this. So I have to play the note and then feel the relaxation. So you must get this feeling of relaxing. I'm going to go into that a little bit more, but let me cover this right hand string shifting exercise. A big problem students have when they learn scales. They start like this, like they'll anchor their hand down and they'll play those first couple notes, but then they can't get down to the lower strings because they're not active at the elbow. I know a lot of people say, oh no, you should play from the wrist. Yeah, the wrist is involved, but the elbow's got to be there first. And that's where the strength is, okay? So you have to activate that elbow. So the first thing that you should do, and test yourself, and this is the beginning of my right hand training for students with a pick anyway, is to just move the width of the strings like this, very slowly. And then to go to each string like this, very slowly. And as you're doing it, you have to pay attention to this. Now, going down is a little more difficult because you're controlling it as it moves against gravity. But this is what you should do first to make sure that your arm is working and the shoulder is relaxed and the elbow is allowing the movement. You swing the width of the strings. You go to the second step is we go to each string. The third step now, this is where the rubber hits the road. Okay, this is the where we play the notes. Okay, so we're going to go down the strings. And we need to be dealing with these physics, the fundamental physics of using the pick, of which is that we are imparting force to an elastic medium, just like when you dribble a basketball. And just like when you dribble a basketball, it's all about that touch and it coming up and you just allowing just the right amount and then you push it back down. Or it's like a trampoline artist. You bounce on that elastic medium, your body relaxes correctly into it, you get all the energy, and then you do whatever you want to do, your flip. Diving board, same thing. If you've dived, you know, if you hit the diving board wrong, you get no spring. You hit it right, it's full of spring. It's the same diving board, but it's how you're interacting. That's the secret with the guitar. And this is true, you know, finger style or pick style, whatever you're doing here, the arm itself must be in what I call a dynamic relationship to the strings, meaning it moves with the tension of the string. What good players are really doing when they play, and a scale will illustrate, is they're using the energy of the string. They're bouncing on the strings. They're doing all the stuff I said. They're relaxing, but like say I'm playing this up pick. I'm pushing up on the pick. Pick is pushing me down. I'm going to use that to get to the next note. Now, a lot of people, what they do is they'll play a note, they'll leave the pick there, and then as another separate action, they will go and play the next note. So every note's separated from every other note. My definition of perfect practice, which I have tested for 10 years now, and holds up very well. Perfect practice is when every note you're playing contains the seeds of the next note. It's helping you play the next note. It's not preventing you from playing the next note. So if I play the note and then I stop, that is not helping me, because now I have to initiate another action. I want to use the energy of each note. Now, sometimes there is stopping, like here, if it's on the same string. It's easy when it's two separate strings, I can bounce to it. Here I got to stop and wait, but I got to relax. And then I play. I keep my motion short. Now I'm going to play, now this note, that, and this is very important, since I'm going to do a down pick here and then an up pick, I have to cross over that string with my down pick. I don't want to stop and then move again. So you have to watch the pick. Keep small motions. And when you have to cross a string, well, this is an inside pick, so I'm bouncing down to it. Now I got to cross, so I got to make that motion down. Okay, and that's what will work when you go fast. Okay, so that concept is called the cycle of the note. You can study it there. To me, it's one of the most important things that every player has to know about, because you have to feel the cycle. Every note goes through a cycle before you play, and this is true of both hands. Okay, finger style, pick style, doesn't matter. If I'm playing finger style, I come to the string. I need to be light at first. I begin to put pressure on the string, and I have to feel that tension reaction, and then I have to let it go. That's the cycle of the note. It is related to this next concept, which is, and this is interesting because, okay, this concept, which I first came into contact with studying Pepe Romero's work, and he was talking about Gaspar Sanz from the 16th century, wrote in his manual on the lute, okay, and those were first guitar players. He said he taught you must not swipe at the string, okay, you must not bat at the string, but you must come to the string, you know, and I forget how he described it, but I thought about that for about 20 years, and then I understood it. And what it means is this, is when there's three phases to every note. Pick style, finger style, doesn't matter. When you're doing your slowest practice, you should feel these three phases. The first phase is the touching of the string, the bringing of the hand to the string. Okay, no pressure. And that must be done. We must be very, very relaxed when we do that. And then the second phase is the application of force to the string. Now I'm pushing on the string. That is the critical phase where most things will go wrong if they haven't already, because the person will over-tense in reaction to the string tension. When you practice and you play a note, you want to use what I call posing. Just sit there with the tension on the string and relax, and then play. Okay, this applies to everything, no matter what you're doing. If I'm playing some classical piece like this, which I wouldn't do on a steel. Steel's a very different feel, by the way, because a lot of string tension. But every note I play, I'm feeling that with my thumb. Thumb is very important in fingerstyle. Now, I should mention here, there's two ways to apply force to a string. This is true fingerstyle, pick style. What good players learn to do on an instinctive level is they learn to add arm weight into their picking or their finger use, the same way as with this hand. So I call this active and passive force. I can come to the string and I can push. I can actively do this with my muscles, or I can just relax. And if I relax, just that arm weight really gets the string down. This is why I teach bouncing. A great technique for connecting your arm to the guitar is you play very slowly, and before every note, you do this. What does it do? It prevents static tension from forming in the arm where you're just tense the whole time, because you can't bounce. You can't bounce if you're holding tension. Remember, the right hand, well, I think of my right hand as a ballerina on a tightrope. That's what the right hand is, okay? In the same way, if someone is on a tightrope and they walk out on the tightrope, when they put their foot out on that tightrope, that foot has to communicate with the tightrope. It has to feel the tension, and the tension at that point in the tightrope will be very strong. And so the foot has to figure out what should my body do so that I can lift that other foot and come out onto the tightrope. And then with each step, it's a dynamic process. If the person isn't completely relaxed, completely able to make all those minor adjustments that they must make, and in communion with the tension of the tightrope, they will fall off. That's how it is for the right hand. Playing here, very different than playing there. As soon as I playing here, when you put this down, you're playing on a very tight string. Good players will instinctively feel that tension and adjust their force, probably adjust the amount of arm weight they're using before they put it on there. Only slow practice, extremely slow practice, will give this to you, okay? So you should know that. That's called the 3 phases of the note. If I were you, I'd think about that for the rest of your life. And, okay, I often like to use this analogy because we're all familiar, you know, when you learn to shoot a gun, they say squeeze the trigger. So why are they saying that? They're saying it for the same reason I'm telling you this. They don't want you to take the trigger with a tense finger and then pull it with a tense arm, because then when it fires, it's going to jerk all over and you'll have no control. Playing a note is just like firing a gun, okay? Instead of squeezing the trigger, we're squeezing the note out. So you should be able to play a loud note and just stop like that, down or up. And what is really happening is the arm, a good player's arm, right arm, is acting as a shock absorber to the shock of each note. And there's a lot of shock here because I have kind of heavy strings on this acoustic. So there's a lot of tension, a lot less tension on the electric. So you have to feel all that. You have to relax. But at the moment of firing the gun, at the moment of firing the note, right before that, you're at the top of the cycle of the note, the most tension. And then I have to relax. You want to think of it this way. Relax with the note. Best if you exhale on it. You play like this. You inhale on the pressing, and then exhale and feel like all that tension is coming out. So that right there is a summary of everything you need to know to move toward, easy scale playing. When you get all this down, you need to use a method I teach called the basic practice approach. And in summary form, it works like this. Whatever movement you're practicing, if it's the scale that I gave you here, with no beat, no tempo, you only pay attention to the body and all those things I talked about with every note. And you go through it just like that. Best to take little sections, by the way. Best to take just that much of the scale rather than the whole scale. Work out the first 5 notes. This is called working in groups. Then take that group, then take that group, then that group, and so forth. Slowly put it together. Slowly put it together. You do it no tempo. Then you go the metronome. You put the metronome on 4 clicks. This is way slower than most people would ever practice, which is why so many people have problems. So now you do it like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And And you, in between, you're focusing on your whole body. You're feeling the whole body. You're feeling the cycle of the note. You're controlling the 3 phases of the note. You are relaxing each time. And you go through the whole thing at 4 clicks at 60, 80, and 100. So you get up to 100. Another key thing is you must touch the string before you play. You don't stay in the air and then bat at it. You go like this. 1, 2, 3. Touch on the 4th click. Play, 2, 3, touch. Play, 2, 3, touch. Play, 2, 3, touch. That's the way you do it. If you work it up systematically with the metronome, 60, 80, 100 at 4, 60, 80, 100 at 2, then you get to 60 at 1. Notice I'm putting a lot of force here. If you find yourself doing this, and this happens all the time, I call it wimpy picking, because what someone will do is they'll start to put less force. This is usually what I see if I ask somebody to play a scale. I'll get like something like that. You can hardly hear the notes because they have no power in their picking. Because what they've done over the years of their playing is, since putting force on the string makes you tense and they don't know how to relax, they just put less force. So when you do your slow practice, you must insist on a lot of force. 1 click. So I'm touching first. I'm feeling my arm weight go into the pick. You build that up to, I usually have people go to 100 at 1 click. Then I have them go back to 8th notes. Now, at every speed, it's the same volume level. It's the same impact. Or is it 16? Okay, double that. So no matter what speed you're going, you have that clarity there because of that type of training. Okay, yes, somebody says, thanks for all the insight over the years. Yes, I've just given you pretty much an outline of everything I've learned in almost 50 years of playing and teaching. And so, if you want to ask me some questions, let's see if I got any questions here. Let's see. Somebody says, can the distal joint eventually bend with training? Yes, absolutely. But, you know, I'll tell you, when I am shaping somebody's left hand, because people have sometimes specific individual, sometimes I get somebody who can't, who's had an accident. I have one student who can't bend this joint, so we had to devise another way of bending the middle joint, putting the finger down, and then doing this. But I don't know, try that. I'd have to, you know, I can't deal with something like that unless I see the person, but you want to do this first. The only problems I've seen in joint bending where I actually believe it may not be able to be improved is the way the 3rd finger bends like that. Now, a lot of people have trouble with that, okay? But I've only seen, I think, about 2 people out of the thousands of people I've taught where I really thought they'd never get that. It was almost like they didn't have a joint there. Now, I am that way in my 4th finger. I studied with Howard Morgan, great guy I'm sure you're all familiar with. Howard had this incredible pinky. I used to like watch it. He'd just flap it down and, you know, it would bend in like that, which is very useful for what he was doing in that jazz type of playing, because it's very useful to be able to do that. I worked on it for a while, and maybe it's because I'm all my classical playing and I'm so used to bending like that, but I cannot get that, and I'm glad I don't really need to. But this one, pretty much everybody needs. You know, you need it for all the, you know, all the chords you're going to play. So that's my take on the joints. Let's see what else here. Jump down. Okay. Could you please work this out? Okay, some pressure on the brachialis plexus underneath the chest muscle could cause a tightening of the, yeah, sure. Tension anywhere. Okay, it's so important to realize you don't play with your fingers. Okay, you play with your whole body. Thinking you play with your fingers is like thinking you dance with your feet. Okay, you don't dance with your feet. The whole body's involved. Every time the foot moves, the whole body has to do something. If you practice with that, this is in my book, what I teach people first, there's no music in my book. Okay, if you're not familiar with it, I mean, just to drive this point home, okay, of how important I think this is. The first two my book has no music in it, and the first two chapters are about things like attention and awareness. Okay, attention and awareness, the price you must pay and what you get for it. Okay, most people don't know how to pay attention, and they don't know what to pay attention to when they practice guitar. So that's the first thing that you've got to get. You have to know what to pay attention to, why you're paying attention. You need to pay attention to your whole body with every note you play, before, during, and after the note. That's just the way it is. Okay. Let's see. Answered that. Okay, people say, yeah, generally people say when they learn this stuff that they cannot believe the amount of tension they've been playing with. And that is true. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, we like our guns in America. That is true. A totally blind guitar player. Best method for, you know, you may have me there, because one of the things I teach people is you must watch your pick. I guess what I would do, I mean, I imagine if you can't see, you get pretty sensitive to things. I would do, if I couldn't see and I was practicing, I would just I would practice what Jascha Heifetz said was the secret of his great playing when they asked him. He said, I know where my fingers are. I would endeavor to really know where everything was. If it was the pick, I guess I'd get really sensitive to whether my pick was in between two strings, touching, whatever. Same thing with a left hand. I mean, I play a lot of times with my eyes closed, because especially with the left hand, it when you use that heavy arm with the continuous contact, never lifting up, it gets pretty easy to do that. Okay. Metronome. I have lots of different metronomes right now. I got this one right here. I like a dial. I hate digital metronomes. I got to tell you that, because if I'm practicing something, you know, let me switch guitars. If I'm trying to get something down and I'm doing a work, like recently I was working on this classical piece, and I'm playing it like this. So I like to start out at 2 clicks at 60 when I'm learning something or reviewing something. Then I reach out and I just move the metronome up, you know, and so I like to just be able to reach out, turn it like that. Digitals make it hard to do that. So I always tell my students, get this kind, because when you use my methods for building speed up on things, it's just much more useful to do it that way. Okay, was I ever in? Yeah, I actually was in a band. In fact, I remember when I think I was 15. I wasn't playing classical guitar yet. I was pretty good. I was taking jazz lessons. So my friends recruited me for a band, and I remember them saying, hey, you know that new Hendrix song, The Wind Cries Mary? And I said, no, I wasn't very cool. I didn't know it. So they had to teach it to me. So yeah, and a few other band experiences. Okay. I don't know if anybody else has any other questions. Somebody says a lot of guitarists use their pinky on the right hand stabilizer. Oh, you recommend getting rid of it? I don't recommend getting rid of most things. See, look, I don't think in terms of right and wrong on the guitar. You know, there's the classical position here for playing, right? There's the, you know, like the cool David Hamburger stuff, which I use myself and use with my students, where you put your hand like that and you're doing this. Technique is what we do and how we do it to get what we want. So It all depends on what you want. Somebody could be a happy guitar player and use this position their entire life, and I'm not going to come around and say, oh, that's wrong, do it this way, you know. However, if you tell me you want to play, you know, classical guitar, you want to do this, so, well, you're not going to play this. You're not going to play this with this hand position. So if that's what you want, then you got to do this. If you want the other thing, then you do that. Okay, let's see, what else? Don't have enough stretch in my hand to reach the full. No, yeah. Okay, so somebody says, I don't have, oh, it's David. Hello, David. Okay. David, David just got the principles, I know that. And he's saying, I don't have enough stretch in my hand to reach the full range of notes. I'll guarantee you, if I was teaching you, you would develop that stretch, okay? No, you can't do it now. It has to be carefully cultivated. Any of my students would tell you this, okay? It sometimes takes months for somebody to, I'm doing this with a few students now, it takes a while for them to get this, and then as we move it down, as the arm extends down, it takes quite a while. You cannot, for many people, trying to play down here and doing what I'm doing here would be disastrous. You're not ready for it. You shouldn't be doing it. You should be achieving it up here first and slowly working it down. Here's another thing you want to realize. When you, any type of playing, okay, as you come up like this, the further you go toward the first string, the more tension will be in your arm. That is because the fingers, it's easiest to separate the fingers when they're extended. The more the fingers curl, just an anatomical fact, the more they curl, the more strength it takes to pull these bones apart, because the muscles that pull these bones apart are here. That means it's easier to do this than it is to do this. It also means that as somebody is practicing, by the time they get to the third string and that amount of bend is required, what they will often do is ease the load on the first finger having to bend that much by doing this with their hand. So what they get is, even if they start like this, they end up like this, and they really can't control things up here because they get, and that's because that as you go up here, in addition to the thumb coming in, you have to be extremely careful as you go to each string. What should happen, even if I do it here, you'll see. What should happen when the one transfers, every time one transfers, nothing else must move. Right here, this is where it gets tough. If you do that very slow, you'll feel it. So nothing here should move. You shouldn't start doing that. But if the hand's not yet ready for it, you'll have no choice but to slant. Okay. So believing that you somehow naturally don't have what it takes to get what I'm talking about is completely erroneous. I have never had a student who did what I told them and didn't end up with what I'm talking about. How would you do? Do you have arthritis? I can't, I can't say about arthritis. I go to a doctor. And I guess if I practice guitar, I'd hope I could, hope it wouldn't interfere with me too much. So can't tell you. Again, if I was trying to see, okay, how much performance can I get out of my hand when I have arthritis, I'd have to work with somebody personally. Kind of skilled the way. Well, thing to understand, I am not an improvising. I teach, rock technique and things like that to people, but I'm basically not an improvising player. So if you're not an improvising player, scales are mostly technical things for you. Okay. Of course, you have to, even if you are an improvising player, you have to master the technical before you can, get to the musical. Jump from scales to playing the melodies that are in my head. Well, grab your guitar, sing the melody, try to find the notes on the guitar. That's what I would do. My influences on guitar. When I first started, I guess anybody who could change chords fast enough to play Mr. Tambourine Man was my influence. But then when I started studying with a jazz teacher, and I started listening to a lot of Wes Montgomery, that was really important. But I'm not, look, you know, I believe everybody's born for a certain style, and most people figure that out as they go along. I've studied lots of different styles. I teach lots of different styles. You can't be great in all styles. So, you know, and everybody does focus on what they're born to play. For me, it's classical and fingerstyle. I love jazz. I play some jazz stuff, but I'm not an improviser. Okay. Oh, and my biggest influence, I'd have to say, after, you know, first it was Segovia when I discovered him, then it was Julian Bream. Julian Bream is my supreme guitarist. Okay, should we strictly practice in the body position? No. This is what I tell everybody. I have all my students practice in this position, even if it's electric. And this is actually a lot like what it's like when you stand with a guitar. The thing is, you sit in this position because it puts the body in the most balanced position. As far as sitting, first of all, I'd never practice in this chair. I don't practice in this chair. I just teach in this chair. But when you want to sit in a regular folding chair is best, or some kind of stool that has just a small cushion. You want to sit to the edge of the chair. You want to push your back in. This is terrible. This is what you want. You want to be pitched forward like this, because that enables the shoulders, the arms to be most relaxed as the fingers do the work they have to do. Here's the thing. If you practice, what I tell students is, I want you to practice in this way. I don't care how you play. You can sit on the couch, you can cross your legs. I can play stuff like, you know, I can easily play like this, because when you're playing, you're using what you've already acquired, okay? But practicing is different. Practicing is training. So in training, you want the optimum conditions. I mean, I could stand on one leg and I could play, but I wouldn't practice that. However, if I was going to perform on one leg, because that's part of the question is, should you practice in the body position we perform in? Absolutely. I mean, when I was playing standing up, well, I practiced standing up, but I'd first practice it sitting down. See, then I'd do it standing up. So if I was going to play on one leg, I'd practice standing on one leg, but first I'd learn it cold in a normal position. Okay, somebody says, can you bend notes on an acoustic? Sure, you can bend notes on an acoustic guitar. I mean, you just can't bend them as far as you can on an electric. You know, I mean, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can bend notes. The thing about bending, the most important thing to realize about bending is the mechanics of bending. Because that was the one thing when I was studying rock guitar, I went to lots of different teachers. Nobody could show me how to bend. I'm like, how do you do that? You know, how do you do that? And I'll very quickly tell you what people are generally doing wrong. What people generally do wrong is they bend just with their fingers. Okay, they do this. Bending works like this. It's a movement of the forearm. Okay, the finger becomes rigid on the string, and you must have this. You must be around like this for a bend. You don't want to be like this. You've got to grip like this. Your fingers come into a slant. It's a very flat position. The finger gets rigid. The power of the bend is the forearm. See, it's this movement. And that's same as vibrato. In order to control vibrato, you need to be moving from the forearm. The fingers are transferring the force, and the thumb is pushing down. Okay, you can just do fingers, because there is such a thing as finger vibrato. You know, that's a finger vibrato if you want that frenetic type of sound. But if you watch good players, this is what they're doing. It's a whole hand kind of thing. You've got contact here. That's very important to have the contact here. And you're going up and down like this. Again, working with the energy of the string. I'm letting the string push me down. I'm pushing it back up. The power is coming from the forearm itself, doing this like turning a dial. So that's what the deal is with bending. Okay. Picks, do I recommend? Look, I'm picking is, I'm pretty good with a pick. There are a lot of people that are better because they do it all the time. Picking is not what I spend hours at every day, but I know enough to get students up to a point where they're probably not going to have any troubles unless they want to be a speed metal player. I like to use small picks. You want to use a hard pick when you're doing single note stuff because you don't want the pick to give. If you're strumming, medium or thin is good because it sounds good. But if you're picking individual notes, you don't want you want that. You can really slam into it like that. That's the way I see it. I think it has to do with the fact that the small pick, it doesn't have a lot of skin popping out over it. I think it gives better control. Crossing the leg over the right knee, yeah, okay. I would never let a student practice that way, but I know, hey, look at Paco de Lucia play that way. So I'm not going to tell him, but if I'm teaching somebody, I can't get results unless they do things a certain way. So I wouldn't have them. But again, playing, you want to put your one leg over the other when you're playing, that's fine. Do I like country? Flappy? Yeah, I love that stuff. Tommy Emmanuel, I love, every time I see him, I'm like, okay, that's all I want to do. But I feel that way every time I see, if I see a good blues player, I see all these different players on TrueFire, whenever I see them, I'm like, okay, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. But, you learn as you go along in your playing life. You can't do everything and you can't be great at everything. So you got to figure out what you most need to do. For me, that's generally the classical repertoire. But I like to, I've studied a couple of those Tommy Emmanuel courses and I have students doing them. And, see, the thing is, when you know how to practice, you can learn anything you want. I mean, that's why I love True. If I would have had TrueFire when I was growing up, God, I would have thought I died and went to heaven. I had to search. You had to search to find anybody that knew how to bend a string. I mean, if you knew the secret of, the end of a Stairway to Heaven, how he did that was like secret esoteric knowledge that few people had. So when you know how to practice, all these courses, I don't know, they're great for you when you really know how to practice, because you can not only practice this stuff, you end up being able to play it well. Okay, when using the heavy arm and the light finger, what is keeping your hand in place? It's the thumb. The thumb is definitely helping here, but it's that pressure. The pressures, look, the heavy arm doesn't mean that you're pulling this down. You got to keep, obviously, you're directing it, but it's definitely a feeling of this being relaxed and you're kind of gripping on here. Okay. Okay, my opinion of Yngwie Malmsteen, some people are absolutely great players naturally. He probably developed very quickly. Obviously, he's a great player. And he's doing what he was born to do. So that's my opinion. To me, look, the world is full of great players and the world is full of talented. I get so many students all the time who've been trying to play for 10, 20 years. And I look at them and I say, I tell them, you have a lot of talent for guitar. And they look at me like I'm crazy. I can see they have a lot of talent. They just don't have the right training. So they're all tied up. But the fingers are there. The fingers are there. Efficient practice techniques when there's not much free time. If there's not much free time, it depends on where you're at in your playing life. If you're still developing the basics of playing ability, which is physical, okay? Playing the guitar is primarily, first and foremost, a physical activity, okay? And you have to understand that, which is why it's terrible for people to be playing music. That's like giving Shakespeare soliloquies before you learn how to construct, say a sentence or form words, okay? You don't want to do that. If you're at the point in your playing life where you're still developing technique, I would put a high priority there. And I would take, and I've done this in my life, like I'll just pick out like what I do now is I have certain passages that if I sit for 2 minutes, like when I was learning that piece I was showing you before, I was experimenting with different fingerings, and I was trying to do this one with my third finger, and that kept not working. So I ended up with this fingering, but it was unfamiliar at first. So I sit down for 2-3 minutes, and that's my chosen little passage, and I just take the metronome and I do a little routine. See, you don't want to just sit down and play it over and over. I would sit down and I'd start at 2 clicks at 60. Notice I'm doing this bouncing. Okay, and I start there, and I'll play through it at that speed. Then I'll move to 80, and I'll move it till I get it to 1 click, and then I'll, double the 8. So within 2 or 3 minutes, I've got it up to the top speed, and then I go do something else because that's all I had time for. Pick discrete little projects for yourself that are going to advance your playing, and then you have to have the right approach to it. You have to understand what the problems are. No, I don't use the pinky on the right hand. I've experimented with that, and if somebody wanted to do that, I know there's some players that do that. They use the pinky here. I just found that I just, again, technique is what you do to get what you want. And I started doing it because I thought, oh, that's cool. I'm going to practice that, I'll start exercising that. But then I didn't really see, there was nothing I wanted to do that I couldn't do without the pinky, so I just gave that up. But that's a decision, that everybody makes. Okay. If nobody has any other questions, I may. How important is it to know all the notes on the guitar? For me, it was very important. So again, like I just had a student the other day, adult, 40-ish, playing for, I think, a year. Realized something had to be wrong because he felt horrible and couldn't play anything that he was being given to play. And so we're trying to figure, I'm straightening him out, but he's asking me, the direction. Well, I said to him, do you want to learn how to read notes? And, he says, no, I don't think I need to. And I said, well, what kind of music do you want to play? And so again, it's all about what you want. If you want to play certain styles, you better learn to read notes. If you want to play classical, I think even to be a good jazz player, if you want to understand music theory on a deep level, you should learn to read. But if you don't really want to, I never tell people what to do. I just try to figure out what's the best thing for them to do, and then I try to help them do it. So it depends on what you want, whether you need to learn to read notes. For me, I was the kind of person, I wanted to know everything. I wanted to read. I wanted to study music theory. I want to study different styles. Okay, so no. Short answer, no. Everybody doesn't need to. Okay. Okay. Yes, very cool. All right, I'm going to go out with, I'm going to play the piece I was playing in the beginning, but I only played a little bit of it. And I'm going to go out with that. It's called Looking Up. So thank you, everybody, for attending, and hope to see you on the web at some point. Bye-bye.